All right, good afternoon, everybody. I am so happy that you are all here. My name is Rebecca Muller, and the very first episode for Exceptional Circumstances for Exceptional Children. I'm looking forward to a robust discussion. What we're kind of going to do is I'll introduce the show and kind of how I got here and what are some of my hopes for the discussion group. We do have a guest today, that is Phillips. I'll introduce her in just a moment. And then we will have time for you to speak and just kind of have a discussion. The main purpose of starting this is, everything has been so unprecedented, right? That is the key word that we keep hearing. And with COVID-19 and school closures, the population that it really has impacted, this time it's impacted everyone. But, we really want to think about how this is impacting special education students and their families, and how we can really get together to navigate through this time, figure out ways to accommodate, to make sure that the students are getting what they need, the families have the support that they need, and furthermore, to get into a place where we can advocate for everyone's needs and to make sure that whatever school looks like come the fall, that we have the resources and the things that we need so that all kids are in the best position possible. So today's episode, we're really focusing on the introduction of this show. We're gonna kind of be talking about some of the issues surrounding education and students with some medically complex needs, and then to highlight the importance of respite for the families and the caregivers. There is no break right now. We are constantly on, and if you have a child with moderate to severe disabilities, there has been resources taken away just because of COVID. So we're going to talk a lot more about that as well. So who am I, right? So first of all, I am so happy to be a part of a wonderful, thriving team. Learning Revolution, there is so many ways to connect. So I'm actually one of 5 shows right now, and I encourage you, now that you're a part of the Learning Revolution family, to go in and to check out what everyone else is doing. But thank you for being here. And so I kind of got here. What is so funny about this is that years ago, I was so proud to be a part of the Global Education Conference Network. I had been doing a lot of work with the United Nations with an NGO called Global Education Motivators. And little did I know that this same network is really now what Learning Revolution has become. And how I got to Learning Revolution is that, honestly, I was just looking for resources. I was feeling the burn of just, what are we going to do now? And an email popped up, and I emailed Steve and I said, is there anything that we can do? Are there conversations happening surrounding special ed? And long story short, he said, not yet, and here I am. So I'm really excited to be a part of this global network. And, I urge you that, after today, if you have other interests, there's a lot more than just and special ed out there. Another thing is all of the shows will be recorded, and you can view them at another time. I know that we all have a lot of obligations and time commitments, even if we are contained to our own homes. So if you do go to learningrevolution.com and go to the groups all the way at the bottom, you'll notice that exceptional circumstances for exceptional learners is there at the bottom, and you can actually subscribe. And I'm really hoping to have continued connections and posting some of the resources so that people can get the information that they need to be a strong advocate for whatever their particular situation may be. So we're already up to 7, which is so exciting. And I hope that that will be a number that continues to rise so that we continue to create this great network. All right, so without any further ado, our guest, which we will try to have a guest every week. So the first one is someone who's and very special to me. So Ann Phillips is the executive director of Delaware Family Voices. But that is not the original way that I know her. I actually knew her son, Aaron, before I knew anything about Ann. Back in undergrad, I volunteered for an amazing organization called Acting Without Boundaries that allows students with physical disabilities to participate in the art of the theater. And so I was able to see Aaron perform as Jafar in Aladdin. And, you know, it's a small world. The next thing I know, my best friend ended up marrying Aaron's brother. And so now Ann is basically a part of my family. And every time we get together, Ann and I just have so much to talk about. She is such a strong support for her son and for the families of Delaware. And for her to be the first guest today, she was actually one of the people that I spoke to when I first started to have this brainstorm of what is going on. People must be like struggling so much, and how do we advocate? And I called her, I said, we really need to just talk. And then the talking led me to Steve, and now we are here. So thank you for being here, first of all. Yeah, I would love for you to share with the group just a little bit more about Aaron and how you became such an amazing advocate for those with special needs.
Okay, certainly. Well, thank you for having me. And I wanted to let everybody who's on the call know that though I'll be talking about respite care and self-care and things to do, it would be great if you feel free to jump in with a question or especially, I'm not sure where everybody is from. And I know that there was somebody from another country, and which is awesome, but I know nothing about what goes on in other countries. So I'm talking about what I know. And I did give some links to Rebecca to share with everybody afterwards, and for some resources. But if you'd like me to look for resources specific to where you are, I certainly can do that. So let's get started. So this is not, as many of you will acknowledge, probably the same as me, it's not the life I planned or the career, but my son, Aaron, was our youngest. When he was 18, he was in an automobile accident, and he sustained a traumatic brain injury and a spinal cord injury, which left him paralyzed from the chest down. And the brain injury, which I knew nothing about, left him with so many cognitive deficits and really made him quite dependent, and a lot of learning. He had to learn everything from scratch, how to speak, swallow, eat, dress. I mean, everything. And that wasn't a quick time. It took a long time. And I had the benefit of 20 years ago, insurance is not what it was today. So he was able to stay in his rehab for months. And I brought him home on his 6-month anniversary of his accident. And I had social workers at the rehabs try to prepare me for what I needed to do and to get everything in place ahead of time. And when I brought him home 6 months later, I didn't have one service in place because it was so hard to figure out and how to navigate and get things because you don't know what you don't know. And so I found uh, partners in policy making, which I don't know if it's international or not, but it's an awesome program. And Aaron and I did it together. And I felt obligated to go to some of these councils that presented and explained things to us to see what we could give back. And I had also made promises to God when when I was being told he only probably had a few hours left to live. I made all these promises that I don't know what I could do, but I would find a positive purpose out of this and do something good. And I started volunteering and going to committees and learning the language, the acronyms and the different terminology and hearing about different things. And one thing led to another. And somehow I'm here in directing Delaware Family Voices, which is part of a national organization. And we're the state affiliate. And we have our own nonprofit. And we work mostly about health, navigating the health and the medical issues and insurance issues, but we never want anyone to call us and us to say, no, wrong number. We make sure that they get to the right people and we call back to make sure that they got to the right people. And if it didn't work and they couldn't be helped, we will figure it out somehow. And if there is no answer, then we know what we have to advocate for.
So,
that's what we do.
yeah. So, what have been some of the issues that have come up specifically in relation to school closures and the COVID-19 crisis?
Well, for our families, they don't have the nursing. And if they do accept nursing, then they are accepting the unknown because the agencies have not been very forthcoming about the whereabouts of what other cases, where else they work. And it's a very frightening thing for them. They also are parents who have to work from home, and though all parents have to work from home right now, and for the most part, and they have children running around. They have children on vents or who don't are nonverbal, um, who have normally have a para or a nurse or a home health aide or somebody else besides them to do these things, both the schoolwork, the medical care that's required, and the parent has other children and their job. So it's been quite a bit. And we've heard about medical suppliers not supplying things for if they've been on a ventilator for their life, and all of a sudden they can't get what they need, something that they should have. Is anyone familiar with the ventilators?
I think you can talk a little bit. We kind of have a mixed crowd here, so.
Okay, so with the ventilators, one parent was telling me that there are circuits and she needs a minimum of 4 a month, and they told her she could get one. And the other thing was the filter, of which is needed to be changed weekly, because that's the whole idea, is not to get any bacteria in. And if you have the same filter, it's going to get dirty and they will not send more. And they're sending them late. So that's been one of many issues, but that was the worst one I could think of. But
Yeah.
still, even getting the food for the feeding tubes, they would, because of the delay in shipping, they needed to get Medicaid, the insurance, the state
Mhm.
insurance, to get involved and tell them it's okay to release it early. We'll pay, so this way they can get it on time.
Wow.
But that took a lot of work, and that's where we come in and do those kinds of things for them.
I think it's interesting too that there's so much that does get processed through a school. If the
Mhm.
kids are at the school, then some of those supplies are being kind of uh, connected with that. They're getting the help, and I think what I noticed is not only is school about learning your ABCs and your arithmetic, there's so many more and services that are provided. And I think a lot of times the regular population doesn't see what happens in a multiply disabled classroom. They're not aware of everything that goes on because it doesn't directly impact them. And I think one of the things that I know personally that I'm starting to get wary about is, what happens when we go back, like what does that look like if we need to be 6 feet apart and they have an assistant that helps them? What are they allowed to do? And how can that, how many parents are going to choose to just keep their child home because it's the safer option? And then does that then put them at a disadvantage with the education? And then just like, and there's so many decisions to be made. I mean, something that you've said to me that just keeps sticking in my mind, you work with students that have always had to fight, but now it's not just this population. Everybody is seemingly having to fight for the things that they need. So how does that get prioritized, right? Forget
Mhm.
exactly what you said. You said like this is the fight that we've all had, right?
Right, right. The people are understandably complaining and being anxious that they're isolated. They can't do their normal routine, and they don't know what's coming and how to get things, and how to see family. And what my families that I work with told me was, this is our norm. This is this is what we experience every day, the isolation. And for a single parent, how do you leave the house and leave your child to go get something from the drugstore? Um, so they said, you find it as inconvenient. This is our life.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I think something else that you said, you don't know what you don't know, and you were speaking in reference to dealing with Aaron when you brought him home, and I can't imagine what that must have been like. But right now none of us know anything, so it's not a singular case across the board. Everybody's just unsure. They don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the numbers look like. We're trying to make these decisions in the best way that we can, but for some of our kids it's not just about going to school and getting, it's their health, it's their being, and it's just how do you start to delineate who gets what and how. And I think there's a lot of this discussion that we're going to get a lot more questions than answers, but I think it's important to ask the questions and connect to see what everybody else is doing. um, so I guess one of the questions that I have for you is just how do you manage being a mother and an advocate for so many of others and not just feeling emotionally drained all day? What are some of the things that you do?
Um, well, first of all, I get great satisfaction of knowing that I am giving the information that I took way too long to learn and find, that I'm empowering somebody,
Mhm.
and um, and I recognize myself in all of them. So there's that. When you have a success story, um, my husband points out that anytime I'm feeling completely down, I have a parent that calls with good news that that something we did together worked out, and always at the right timing. But I respite care is something that is has proven to be invaluable, but it's not always the typical respite care. Is there a way to ask people,
Yeah.
or hands, or if they receive respite care or know what it is?
How familiar are we with respite? Feel free to either chime in, you can take your microphone off or you can type in the
Do you
box.
know what it is, and had you been receiving it before the pandemic?
So I think we have a lot of teachers. I don't know if we have any parents on
Okay,
board right now.
okay.
But yeah, so why don't-
So with respite care, which is a break, a much needed break for the caregiver, though my son pointed out when I was hesitant to do it, he was like, well, you need a break. I know I need a break, Mom, from you. And I was like, you know what? He's right. We're
that
still
is
in the same
Aaron for
place.
sure, though.
But it's true because they are seeing the same face day in and day out. And though you can't go away, there are things you can do that would help. And um, there are creative ways, and traditional respite care can be where somebody gets paid through an agency to come and stay with your child, or take them out into the community or what have you, but you're not involved. And it's for you to do what you want to do. Well, now with the pandemic, not only can you not get respite because they're not sending people in, and you can't take them out into the community, um, you have to find the time for yourself. And it might not be hours, an hour, it might be minutes. So you really have to think about what makes you, the stress level, feel better, because this is all about the stress. And some of us have been living with it for a very long time, and we learn how to deal with it, sometimes not in a healthy way, but we're still dealing with it. Um, Whether it's overeating or drinking or yelling or, you know, kinds of things that you're taking it out on somebody. Um, but right now, my own example is because I don't have in-home help, I'm up during the night, and because he has to get turned every couple hours. And I do some things that I could do during the day, but I enjoy doing them knowing the phone can't ring and interrupt me.
Mm.
Um, I'm watching the stupidest shows on TV, but
Sometimes
I
you need
can,
that.
you know, and doing things that I want to do, including scrubbing my house like it has never been scrubbed. Because there's nobody to, I have at least 8 hours before somebody comes in and either has a dirty footprint or a wheelchair with stuff on it, which he's not even outside. I don't know how it happens, but he does.
Right.
So there's that. So I thought a lot about that, about what can I do to make me smile when I don't have time to really give myself time.
Mhm.
And I realized as I spend days doing things, what is bringing a smile to my face. The first thing is something that I did years ago because I was so stressed at the beginning of not knowing what to do. a picture of a rowboat on a lake, because that's my dream, is to be on a lake at all times. I find that to be the most relaxing thing. So I keep a picture in my bedroom. And when I cannot sleep and I'm stressed and everything's going through my head, I grab that picture and it allows me to think about something happy.
Mhm.
With that's not real, not for me yet, but there's no, because I don't have to think about the bills. How do I pay for that place? I just can think about, you know,
Yeah.
so that's one thing. But there's so many things for self-care that you can do. Going outside in your yard, down the street with a mask is so important and so refreshing for so many. It's like a freedom.
Mhm.
And when my grandchildren, I watch them once a week now, and to help my children be able to work from home. And we go for a walk and watching them discover things through their eyes, it's fantastic. So that gives me great respite. I'm exhausted and need to nap for hours and hours after they're gone,
Right.
but it's well worth it.
Yeah.
And so things like that that you can do. Now, one of the big things that everybody is feeling is the inability to see their friends and family. And I would say, yo, it's not the same, but take advantage of the virtual, of the Zoom, and with friends, with your family, with your coworkers, and try to get that normalcy. And for you to take time, if you really want to sit down and read a book for an hour or take a bath, do something by yourself without children, if there's a way to have the therapist or a grandma or a friend schedule a time that you can do that and they can sit, if your child is able to enjoy something that they do. My brother came up with, and we just did it the other night, and he's scheduled it for 2 nights a week. He found some games, my son loves word games, that he can do with him, and they're playing these games online, and it's something now he has to look forward to.
Yeah. I think that's so true. I mean, there's, some compound things when you have a student with, or a child, I should say, with special needs. But I think everything that you said, if not for anything else, everyone should have created some sort of empathy, because we've all felt that now. We've
Mhm.
all felt that, the racing thoughts, what is going to happen to some degree. And so, while, it's easy for us to think about our own situations because it's what we know, right? But I hope that this is going to create a little bit more empathy for the families that deal with this, whether it's COVID or it's not.
Mm.
Um, some of the things that you said, I think we all need a break from just, I have a toddler at home, and like right now, what doing, this is my break, because this invigorates me to talk to other professionals, to know what the thoughts are, so that we don't feel isolated and alone and in this little a bubble, because sometimes it feels like that within our communities. um, I know that I have stayed up many nights worrying about some of my specific students, and just knowing the types of homes that they were going home to, their situations. I had, some of my students in foster care, and you think about them and you worry, and it's just that helpless feeling when you feel like you can't do. Um,
Mhm.
it's so important to connect and to find ways to just talk to others who may have experienced the same thing. So I'm so happy that we're all here today. Um, so if anybody, I would love just to open up the floor for some discussion. If you had a connection with a story, if you have, whether it affects you personally, or something that you're looking for to get some advice on how to advocate and find the resources, feel free.
I would like to add just one thing
Yeah,
before we get
absolutely.
started with that, is that um, parents in general usually have guilt about something, with their children. And I know that um, I do, and the families I serve, we hear this all the time. They're not doing it right or enough or good, whatever. And now the guilt added to needing to teach their children
Mhm.
on things that they don't feel comfortable with, do therapies that they aren't familiar with and aren't licensed as a therapist and a nurse. So, my suggestion is to give yourself a break. You don't have to be perfect and do it perfect. And you don't have to be in front of the computer teaching them for an 8 hour day or 6 hours or whatever. You do what you can do, but for the sake of the stress of you and your child, just do it consistently. Have a schedule, because a schedule brings in normalcy in this abnormal situation. And so if you're only going to teach for an hour, just do it the same hour with the same routine for them, because you'll get less rebellion when you make them wake up the same time that they should wake up versus, oh, when you get up, we'll do this. You need to have structure, because everybody needs some structure. And so I would think that's your most important job. It's not how you do the job of teaching or therapy or nursing. It's just that it's consistent and that they have something that's that they can count on, whatever that is. So that was my 2 cents there. And
Absolutely.
give
And
yourself a
as
break.
and as you're saying that, I'm seeing all of the proposals start to kind of filter down of what school is going to look like. And it's none of it is what you just said consistent, because it looks
Ah,
like it's going to be, like some days it's going to be, group A, and then you're at home, and then it's group B, and then it's just, I mean, I'm hoping someone comes up with a magic solution. I don't know what that's going to be. And I think too that in this time, it may not be a magic solution for an entire district. It may be that it might be a solution. We might have to really think about the individual families and say,
mm,
okay, what's good for them? And it's really bringing to light what schools do for a family, how it provides the structure within the day, how that is incorporated into our society, right? There's so many and people that are waiting to figure out what they're going to do with their jobs until they find out what they do with their kids, and chicken or the egg, who's going to go first. And I think it really comes down to parents knowing their situation and being able to say, this might not work for me. What can we do? And that's the part that I'm wary about. People feeling like they don't have options, or people that are going to start to say, okay, well, I'm just going to homeschool or send my kid to a private place. And now we're going to get a gap and a disparity between the types of education that everybody gets. And so what does that look like? And and this is kind of some of the other topics that we're going to be and talking about. But you really have to figure out, okay, this is the what we're going to navigate, what we currently have. Now, taking what we have, let's figure out how to make it work for now, which we've all kind of piecemealed and tried to figure out. But it's the advocacy, the what's next. How can and it's so hard when you can't predict the future and see multiple steps ahead, but being prepared, having the resources, knowing what your options could be. And, if there's a certain end situation, having the parents feel comfortable enough with their teachers and providers to discuss what the best thing will be for that family. Um, and like I said, I don't know what that looks like. I hope that, it's going to come to a place where there was something else that you said, how you took this whole situation in your personal life and you found a positive purpose.
Mhm.
I'm hoping that more positive can come from this, that we start to see kind of what is the most important thing in education. How we really need to think about mental health, physical health, and then we can get to the language arts and the math and the test scores, right? If we don't have those things at the top, if we don't consider all of the medical needs, even with a child that gets it, God forbid they get sick, we're finding out that COVID is not just a lung disease. It's not a flu. It's affecting the blood cells. It's going into the organs, and there's a lot more things. And there's so much we don't know. But like, okay, so now we have a kid that was fine. Now they're going through the treatment. How do we educate them too? What
Mhm.
does that look like? I don't know. Questions, not a lot of answers. These are the things that
Yeah.
keep me up at night. Does anybody have any questions or things that they wanted to jump in with? Um, I know, and Christoph, I see that you don't have the speaker, but you can hear us, which is great. Oh, here, Deb has something. What do you suggest to parents who have children with significant medical needs and are hesitant to send them to school in general, now also with COVID, that makes for more concerns?
Mhm. Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I know many families in with that same question, and I know during the school year before this all happened, um, they would keep them home if, but they had a nurse to be home with them. That's the difference. Um, and they don't necessarily have that luxury now. Their jobs, they have to do their jobs from home, or they've got to go. So they're really scared. And I understand that. And I don't have an answer. And I think everybody's waiting to hear what their schools come up with. Um, but I don't know. I know in this country, the law for the IDEA
Mm-hmm.
um, is that if the school is closed more than 10 days, which it has been, um, if they're providing learning for the general population of their students, they have to provide what was in the child's IEP, including this assistive technology. And unfortunately, that's not happening. And a lot of parents have told me, you know what, it's getting to the summertime. We're not worrying about it now. Others are freaking out because the therapies that they need, and they're seeing regression. For some, they're just seeing regression because they don't have the socialization.
Mm.
Um, so that is all something to consider. Education is not my um, forte, but I've done some research since we've been talking, and I was um, pleased to see that that is in the law. But again, if you're not challenged, but I do encourage families in this country to call their disability law programs or community legal aid, because they have experts on that, and they can help you with the school district.
One of the stories that I've heard was that students that share their communication device, so they're at schools and they get to
Mhm.
share. that's not permissible now, because with COVID, you can't share things if there's any educational material. So it's one thing if, okay, everybody has to bring a pencil. It's a different story when you're talking about a communication device that costs money, of
Mhm.
course. And that's something that, we're going to have to account for. So when that is something that we need to think about, um, I feel like um, whoever is, hi, how are you? um, if you don't mind muting, thank you. But if we're not considering that, the cost, I'm worried about budgets. And that's not something that's in my forte, right? That's not something that I'm completely aware of within my own school district and kind of how that all works.
Mhm.
But, you know, do we have the funds? Can the kids, I know, like, we're fortunate because we're one-to-one with the computers, which has been great. There's a
Mhm.
lot of school districts out there that are not. So then, what are we going to do? Where's the money and going to come from? How do we guarantee access? Once again, a lot more
Another
questions.
concern when we're talking about the parents' fears with their children who are medically complex, anyway, if they have the options of you go to school just a couple of days a week, that means you only have the para a couple of days instead of every day. So that para is going to be working with other children. So that means more exposure and more anxiety again for the parent.
Oh,
So there's so
absolutely.
many things to think about.
And I know that there are, and Deb just said that the federal and state governments are cutting funding as we speak. Absolutely. Um, yeah, with the paras, I think that might be an entire discussion that we have. One, for the paras to stay on board, how can we use them in the best way during remote learning, so that their positions don't get cut? Because if we do go back to a face-to-face model, they are essential. I know there's some classrooms that can't run without having that additional support. But if I'm someone who's looking at how they can chop things off the chopping block and we're starting on remote learning, that might be something that we don't consider. And so it's really looking at individual needs in a way that we might have done on paper, but that we really need to do now in a very real way. Um, and I know for me, just from the teaching aspect, I really feel like I've gotten to know my families so much better. I've gotten to talk to them and kind of talk them through some of the anxieties that they're feeling, and have conversations that I don't think we would have had it
Mm.
been a regular school year during like a parent teacher conference. And I really feel like I got to know my students too. And that includes what they can and can't do. We got to talk more about what they were feeling. I'm in a decent position where most of my students that I will have again next year. I hope. And so that will kind of help us to build those relationships. So if you didn't have those relationships though, and you didn't reach out to the families as a teacher, because maybe you were overwhelmed in dealing with your family, and if somebody got sick, like, it just changed kind of how normal business in education gets done. And I think that there are positive things. I think we can all kind of find the positive purpose, but we can't do that without that connection.
Mm.
um, which I think, once you're affected in any way with a unprecedented circumstance, you know, you need to reach out and start to find resources. And when the resources are not there, sometimes you need to create them. And I'm speaking right to someone in the audience right now who will be a guest speaker in a few weeks. If it's not there, then create it. And I think, you know, that comes to getting a good resource, like the resources around you together, finding out who in your community has strengths that could be helpful and really band together. You know, we can't, right now, it feels like we can't control what is going on from the top down. So maybe it has to start from local communities, you know, knowing individual families, being able to speak on their behalf, starting small within your own district and just kind of branching out from there. And hopefully we will find the light at the end of this, what seems like a ongoing tunnel. So yeah,
So if I could go back
absolutely.
to some respite, because respite isn't available for most now, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out. If you're in getting your state Medicaid, you should be calling your state's Medicaid office to find out, or your insurance through them, to find out what accommodations they have made for the virus. They have been allowed, if your child is getting the Medicaid through a waiver, they are allowed to apply for what they call an 1135 waiver because of this pandemic. And for instance, in our state, the prior authorizations that drive everybody crazy, they have suspended them. If you already had one, then it's just continuing. They're not doing like if you're we're going to needed a redetermination, they do that like every year. If you still they're skipping that and assuming you are still qualified, things like that. But it's really important. And I know in not our state, but a couple of other states were able to get because they weren't getting their Medicaid pays for respite in the waiver, and they can't get the respite, so they got the money to be able to pay somebody that they trusted to come into their home.
Right.
And they were able to use their funds. So there's ways, and I will always tell people, don't be afraid to ask for something like it sounds like you're reaching for the stars, because you are, but do it, because you never know. There's some states that are paying parents for their cell phones so that make sure that they don't lose connections.
Interesting.
So there's all kinds of things, but the other thing is things that you can, creative things you can do for yourself to give yourself a break. If you have many parents who have kids with special needs, no other parents, do a little group, a weekly night thing for yourselves. Do one with the kids.
Right.
Do it at lunchtime and let them eat lunch together. And just to see their friends, even if they're not speaking or whatever it is. But just knowing that is so important, just to reconnect. The same thing with, and the other thing is that your stress is from whatever stress they have, you're going to be stressed if they're unhappy and miserable or whatever. You know the saying, you can only be as happy as your unhappiest child.
I haven't heard that, but
yes,
there you go.
There you go. So the news, be very particular about how often and what you're watching and in front of who. You should talk to your children honestly about what's going on, very succinctly, without, drama, because there's enough. But they don't need to be watching the news. like that, and you don't either, not the 24 hours,
Mm.
because it just adds to it. So be good to yourself. And your positive attitude will hopefully, you're the model, you're modeling it for your kids. I mean, that you do every day, but now you can't escape it. So it's harder, it's exhausting being positive
Yeah. I
sometimes.
mean, and I think that's true in your own homes. It's
Mhm.
true if you are running an online course of
Mm.
some sort. You know, the kids, when they came to school, sometimes you were their smiling face that they got to see. So be that presence online too, even when they're not connecting, making sure that you're reaching out, making sure that if you haven't heard from them, reaching out and saying hello, because some of the best moments of remote learning had nothing to do with the teaching aspect of actually like, this is your math lesson. Some of them were simply, I had one day where I actually had more than one kid sign on, which was amazing. And the kids sat there and they were sticking pencils to see who could get the most pencils in each other's hair. And they were keeping count. I was like, well, you're counting. That's math. And you know what? We laughed. We had fun. The kids, they still talk about it on like the Google Hangout. And sometimes you just have to pull down the fact that if they're not laughing, if you're not connecting, nothing else is going to matter. If you're like, I started the lesson like at first I'm like, oh guys, exponential functions, we're gonna track the virus, and then I realized that was a terrible idea. Well, I was so excited that it actually fit what we were learning. It wasn't the most positive thing that we could have done. So you know what? We went to pencils, and then we graphed that. So, you got to make it, work when things, and I think some of us are so by the book. Sometimes that's really hard to say,
Mm.
wait, this is my plan. I can't go away from the plan. And I know special ed, I might be preaching to the choir right now, but flexibility is number one. You go in, you think you're going to teach a lesson, and that kid is having a bad day. I saw that, and somebody teaches emotionally challenge kids. When that kid walks in the door, whether you can have a great day or not, so finding ways to do that online too, to have check-ins. Sometimes they don't like to show their faces. You're not having that same regard of knowing how the kids feeling. So taking the time to talk about it or to have some sort of check-in system. I think it's so important that we have to really think about our emotions and how we're coming in to this. So, but yeah, so I mean, we are wrapping up. Does anybody have any last questions or comments? I would
I
love,
want to remind them about
yep,
the links, though.
yes.
There's resources.
So I will be posting that. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. So if you need to contact me, this is my email address. Feel free to connect there. And that is her connection as well. If you join our group, like I mentioned before, all right, I'm going to post whatever the resources that she has for us to that site. So I highly recommend you going to learningrevolution.com. Go to groups. You do have to sign up and register for Learning Revolution and become a part of this wonderful community of educators. And I hope that we can continue the conversation there. If you have ideas of some things that have popped up for you as we started to talk today that you would love to explore more, by all means, we can get that in a discussion group, or we could create an entire session, because we will be doing this every Wednesday at 2 p.m. You would log in the same way that you did today. What's awesome is that once you do register, you will get a weekly update of all the shows that are happening. So I want to just mention that. We have Teaching by Heart, The Connected Classroom, Thrive in EDU, and Reinventing School. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to stop sharing real quick. And thank you so much for being my guinea pig and my first person to kind of go here. And for, I actually called Anne in the middle of one of her respite naps, and I felt very badly about that. Did we have some more? Was there? I just saw pop up 2 more questions. Okay. So yeah, so thank you so much. Please continue to reach out. That is how we are going to be able to navigate, accommodate, and advocate for all of those children that are so dear to us. And hopefully I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.